We are recording for the first podcast of Super Sunday. I'm here with the three lads that I did mention in last week's video. We've got Curtis, Aidan and Toby for the first podcast. Now, as mentioned, we have a couple of ideas. We've got a document, and I think what's right is if we all introduce ourselves, particularly you boys, you state the club you support. I think that's a good place to start, and then we can go off from there.
Who's going first then?
Go first.
Toby, you seem keen.
Yeah, I'll go there. I'm Toby, and I'm a massive Arsenal fan, and they're obviously the best. So there's no point in discussing anyone else. Aidan, move on. Go to your crappy club.
Yeah, I mean, lifelong Newcastle fan. So these are good times right now, but we'll wait and see. Go on, Kurt. Finish them off.
I'm Curtis, and I'm from Sheffield, so naturally I'm a Sheffield United fan because that's the only team in.
Oh, couple of technical difficulties there, Curtis. I'm sure you're.
I'm dying.
You're dying, son. You're dying.
Oh, fuck's sake! What's next? Don't do me like this. Not today. Right. Gonna have a swift change of location.
So.
Sorry about this.
That's all right. Don't worry. I mean, it's all due. I think in terms of everyone's internet is in somewhat of a bad shape every day now because the internet's just getting pounded due to current certain situations. Everyone's trying to stream Bundesliga. Everyone's trying to watch some torrent American films and Netflix or something like that. And I think without football, boys, there's no Super Sunday. So this is what this is here for, really.
This is as good as it's gonna get. You wanted Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, and you've got Curtis, Ethan, Toby, and Aidan.
What more could you want?
I think that's pretty much the same thing. Let's be honest, we're both like us four and them two with the same level of talent in terms of football. Let's be honest.
Oh, definitely. Without question.
I saw a thing actually that Gary Neville was supposedly put as the best right back the Premier League's ever had.
Nah.
I mean, right backs are very, very. It's not the quality in that pool of position isn't that fab as it is.
Not to be fair,
Probably like the longest running, like you went the longest, but don't know if he's the best.
Class of '92 in terms of consistency, definitely, but in terms of talent and making a difference on the pitch, there'll be a couple more examples to give.
Toby, who was your right back during your Invincible season?
Right back. I want to say Invincibles. We had a lot. We had Cole, we had Campbell in back. We had we didn't actually have a consistent right back. Thinking about it, that was the one bit in the Invincible season that was the only position because we had players like Cole and Campbell that were sort of the solid back, and Vieira was there consistently.
It wasn't Lauren, was it?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like
Lauren's bringing up. I'm thinking that as well.
That's the thing, but again, he was a bit of a rotation player, Lauren. Like, I think if you had to put one in, it would be Lauren. But in terms of right back, that was actually the one position that just kept on changing because we had quite a few. Because we had a lot of the youngsters coming in at right back during the Invincible season that sort of went on to the post-Invincible bit. But Lauren was like the only name that comes to mind. Yeah,
I mean, in terms of it, once you've got a solid right back, you never really stop because after Neville, we had Valencia. Oh, well, Raphael. I'm going to throw Raphael in there. Raphael Valencia. But I think it's the same with every club. You look at Chelsea, they've had Ivanovic. But before Ivanovic, who was it? Like, I can't recall who it was.
I don't know.
What? I mean, we're going back like 13, 14 years now?
Yeah.
Been there a while.
You look at Spurs after Kyle Walker's left, Aurier's done terrible. If he's not getting sent off, he's conceding goals.
Very true.
And I think Kurt will say that Georgie Baldock's the best right back the Prem's ever had.
I mean, on paper, he's getting the points in on fantasy team, isn't he? So
He is.
That's really all that matters. He's much more attacking right back though. You know, obviously we play very sort of attacking system, the overlapping centre back and stuff, mainly wing backs / right mids, whatever you want to call it. Really, he's getting down the line, getting them balls in. But you know, so is Trent Alexander-Arnold, but they're conceding still. It's not quite there with the defensive side of the game.
Yeah,
I'd say give him 2 or 3 years, and he builds on that. Then you probably will be the best right back in the world in terms of like defensive style as much as his attacking. He's a good wing back at the minute, but yeah, he does need to work on his defense quite a bit.
You never know, he might even end up being like another Gareth Bale, where he starts off in a defensive position and then moves all the way up to the other side of the pitch and just pure attacking.
Talking of Liverpool, I saw a quote. I'll read it out. This is from Michael Ballack, who arguably one of the best centre mids that football scene, well, defensive mids, very good at Chelsea. Virgil van Dijk is very lucky to play in an era where there is no Drogba, Lampard, Shearer, Henry, Rooney, Van Persie, Tevez, Adebayor and Diego Costa in the Premier League. No wonder he thinks he's the best defender in the league.
I mean, with those names you mentioned, you're talking a lot of like no-nonsense, in-the-box sort of strikers, you know, that can hold the ball up and just smack one in.
Yeah.
I suppose you could agree with that because there's not that many strikers in the Prem nowadays that are like that. Like, there's no Drogba, there's no Henry, there's no Shearer. So yeah, maybe that type of attacker isn't around anymore. So maybe could argue it could be easier a little bit for centre backs.
Yeah.
I think we're still in a bit of a transitional kind of period with the Premier League. It started to show in about 2014, 2015, mainly Man City running the show, and then suddenly they just started sort of dropping off and dropping the ball a little bit, and then Leicester come in and they managed to actually win the league, which 10 years ago, granted they had great management, great players and stuff. It was a remarkable achievement, but still, it's not something that's very likely. It's about as likely as Gary Lineker doing match of the day in his pants. So I think we're still sort of coming to the end of that period. Liverpool's now coming strong again, but there's still space for those kind of unique seasons where the unlikely team the underdog will come to fruition throughout the season, like Sheffield United.
Yeah, Chef's a good example because Champions League places on the cards for you, isn't it?
I mean, I think I have a bad feeling that the momentum gathered from the season as it was played in normal time may have dropped slightly. That's probably a bit of a concern. I know that we'll go out and we'll definitely perform when the season resumes, and I really do hope so. But it's still a big ask. I think we've got a game in hand at the moment over Man United, and defensively we're still very solid, but it's always a bit of an iffy one when there's been a long break, especially for teams that aren't likely to succeed, like your Manchester Cities or your Arsenals or your Chelseas.
Yeah, I think that's well put, to be fair. And I think maybe in 2-3 seasons' times, you're going to have to start looking at bringing in that next generation of centre-back, because O'Connell, Egan, I mean, Basham's not going to be playing in the Prem in the next 3 years, I can imagine.
No. These are they have come from the Championship, and I think that's the kind of robust mentality that they've brought to the Premiership, which may have offset quite a few strikers who have been there for a long time.
Yeah.
So obviously, the Championship's a very physical game. It's it's a world apart from the Premier League. And I think maybe the physical side of it is what we're using to our advantage now defensively. We're able to we have the height, we have the power to keep the top strikers that are more like the sort of poacher style, like Sergio Aguero, keep them at bay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch on Newcastle's takeover in a minute in terms of rebuilding a club. But one question I do want to ask is, Toby, what is going wrong at Arsenal to rebuild Arsenal? What needs to happen, or what's gone wrong?
Well, like the main sort of persistent problem we've got is ownership. Like the fact is, Stan Kroenke, our owner, is now the 100% owner of the club. He bought out every shareholder, so we're no longer a shareholder club. He owns 100% of the club, so there's no money coming in from anywhere other than him, effectively. And he's just starving the club. He cares about his teams in America far more than he does Arsenal. Arsenal are his money pot for when things go wrong in America, and he keeps on coming out with all the reasons why he's not able to invest, and it's all rubbish, frankly. Because it's been estimated that over the past year, his wealth has increased by 300 million quid, and now he's saying to the players, he's asking players to drop their wages during the present time because the club is unable to finance itself effectively, and they want to create this self-sustaining model. It's just never ever going to work. And I remember Arsenal fans having a go at Wenger in his last few years, and they were putting all the problems at his door. You change the manager and you still have the same problems under Emery. You change the manager again to Arteta and you still have the same problems. So if it's not the manager, it's got to be something else. It's got to be from higher up. It's got to be from the board, and it is. And unless there's serious financial injection into the club, because although people point to the last transfer window where we brought in the likes of Pepe and we had a massive spend, nearly 200 million. If you actually look at net spend, it's next to nothing. And unless there's serious injection like you've seen at City, the club's going nowhere. Effectively, we will keep falling. We'll be a mid-table team unless there's serious injection from the top. But Kroenke is just not the owner who's going to do that. He's not the man.
So you say you spent 200 mil on players. You brought in Guendouzi, who 19-year-old French midfielder, has his games, can be woeful at times. Do you think then that there could be an issue with scouting? United have had that issue for ages now, where we've not been bringing in the right players. Pepe, I think he had one good game in the Europa League where he scored 2 goals, and maybe got one or two goals in the Prem. I don't want to say stats wise.
Pepe's been a bit. I don't want to say disappointment, because the club has had a pretty tumultuous season. We've had a manager change. We've had various changes when it comes to the buying team. So things have not been smooth exactly, but Pepe hasn't exactly been what we'd hoped so far. In terms of scouting, I think improvements could be made, but when you look at other players we bought in Martinelli, for example. Martinelli was a completely unknown player, and he's tipped to be a potential Premier League great if he continues on the path he's gone. We've also got people like Saka, who have been brought up through the youth, who has also been fantastic. So I think while scouting, yes, definitely could be improved, I don't think it's the number one issue, such as it may be at United. But yeah, I think we've got bigger problems than scouting overall.
With scouting, you're always gambling, really. You know, there's so much difference in the style of play between, for example, the Bundesliga or Liga and England. You see countless times, time and time again, where a player will be tipped to be the next Premier League great, and they just flop because they can't adjust to the style of the league, or they've come into a huge team like Manchester United, and there's immense potential, but also a lot of pressure, and they struggle to perform to that to that expectation. And I think that can be the problem quite a lot of the times. Like, for example, with Sander Berge, you know, he's a relatively unknown player, but he's said to have huge potential. But it's going to take him time to adjust from, you know, playing in the Bundesliga to playing Chelsea away. It's a massive gap, and you've got to give players time. Otherwise, they're not just going to, you know, work miracles off the bat.
No, and I think one key signing that we've seen it happen with was Memphis Depay for United. And I think every club has had that one player that had that potential to go somewhere but never did. I mean, it's more your big clubs, I would say. Like we never really knew that Cameron Jerome was going to bang it at Stoke, you know what I mean? But there's definitely players that have had potential. Like you look at Wolves, Adama Traore come from Barcelona's youth team, and he's killed the Prem since he's been in it for like, I think it's 2 seasons now. In terms of other signings, big players, Joel Linton for Newcastle. You've paid what, 40 million for Joel Linton?
40 million for Joel Linton. And now with Joel Linton, because he didn't come in with that much hype. He only scored 7 goals the previous season, so I don't know why we paid 40 million for him. But all right, he's young, he does have potential. But I wouldn't even say he's bad out and out. He does put a shift in on the pitch, I'll give him that. But he's got very low confidence. He's come in with a lot of pressure on his shoulders immediately with a massive price tag, club record fee at that age. And then I think it's just got to him a bit, and he's not performed as well. And I think that's a big thing with younger players coming to the Premier League. There's now that many eyes on them. Money in football is ridiculous now, so that's just going to add another thing to it. For a lot of the medium to smaller clubs, it's a lot of the life of the area where it'll come from. For example, Newcastle football's very big there. So yeah, there's an added pressure, I think, with the Premier League compared to other leagues.
Fair enough.
That's why I think, you know, how you've got Jadon Sancho. He's doing very well in the Bundesliga. Came from Manchester City. He's now flourished. He's tipped to be, again, one of the Premier League greats. Everyone's vying for his signature. But I think now, at this point, if you try and bring him into a huge team like Man United or City or Liverpool, there'll be so much pressure on him. He won't be allowed to perform. You talk about players that have to be built around as in the team. And I think if Jadon Sancho was to come to the Premier League, he would have to be one of those. Like, using an example from a while ago, like Matt Letizia, he was a fantastic player, but he never like made it into the England squad because there was already too much competition there, and that competition can sometimes stunt another player's growth. You know, we want competition, that's great, but in terms of Sancho personally here, it's very difficult to allow him to flourish. And I think he needs a few more years in the Bundesliga to get a bit more experience and to have that true belief that he can do it in the Prem.
Do you think, as well, just following on from that, Kurt, you mentioned with Matt Letizia not getting in England set up and never really, other than scoring a lot of goals and making a lot of appearances for Southampton, he never really did anything else with his career. Do you think there's part of that, and this is open to everybody, do you think part of that is the profile of club that players go to? So, for example, Matt Letizia, Southampton, lower mid-table club, never really burst above that. Alan Shearer for a long while at Newcastle, again, mid-table club at the time, not doing a lot particularly in the 2000s. So with Jadon Sancho, in order for him to become the next, you know, Ronaldo or whoever, do you think it's got to be the right club as well as the pressure that's on him? So if you went to Man City or to Liverpool, would that be the best fit, or would Man United or would Arsenal be the best fit? So just open the question there.
I mean, in terms of club profile, I think there's a case of both. So why Southgate's playing Ross Barkley at centre attacking mid? I don't know, because he plays for Chelsea more than likely. But then on the other hand, you had that season that Leicester won the league. Jamie Vardy came into the England squad. 18 months later, he retires playing for England because Harry Kane was playing ahead of him. Now,
True.
I know a lot of pundits and a lot of commentators have said that Vardy is actually a better striker than Kane. But then you've got to look at Callum Wilson is in the England 24-man squad, I believe, from Bournemouth. Danny Ings is there, but they're not going to get a look in unless Kane is injured.
Yeah, I know that. I think, this Alan Shearer said this on Match of the Day once. It's like, because he retired from international football quite early. I think it's more a case of like not pushing yourself too hard, because obviously as players get to past 30, things start to break down, and they're not as fit. Obviously, I think Jamie Vardy is a quality striker, but in terms of, I think if he'd continued trying to play for England, then his Premier League performances would have suffered as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of a big club, you look at how many young English players Chelsea have. Mason Mount, Tomori. You look at Arsenal, Saka is English. I mean, I'm going to throw Maitland-Niles in there, but he's a bit suspect at times, I think, in terms of he does.
I don't think he's quite at England level yet. I don't think he justifies enough to get a call up just yet. Saka,
I reckon he could maybe both of them could maybe get an appearance again, in like a qualifier, let's say 2 years down the line against Kosovo or whoever, But yeah, in terms of starting, no, they're not near enough.
Club profile, one name I want to throw out there, Dean Henderson. Pickford has been ropes for the last half of the season. Roy Keane. Roy Keane has said it heavily about keepers this season. Should Dean Henderson be England's number one?
I think so, personally. I mean, I may be biased because obviously he's playing for Sheffield United at the moment. But I think if you've got a keeper, you need to be confident. If the opposing team is attacking and you're watching the match and you're thinking, like, shit, this is it. We're conceding. That's it. It's just fine, whatever. Just take it. Then if you don't have that confidence in the keeper, then they shouldn't be there. So with Dean Henderson, he had one quite catabolic slip up against Liverpool. Unfortunately, it cost us the match, but he's still 23. And those sort of mistakes, I think, are a lot easier forgiven for a team who's not expected to do quite so well and who are doing quite well. It's a lot easier to sort of brush off because the gravity of the mistake isn't as high as if De Gea, fumbled and then you conceded in the Champions League quarterfinal, something like that. It's a lot easier to sort of get over. And I think club profile again comes into it in the sense that Sheffield United, there's not as much pressure. So it's allowing him to flourish and to learn from those mistakes as opposed to dwelling on them and, keeping them remembering them for bad reasons as opposed to learning opportunities.
Yeah. I think in terms of top keepers, you look at Kepa, Ederson, Alisson, De Gea, Lloris. I would say in terms of big names, I'm going to put Rui Patricio in there as well. Leno, killed it in the Bundesliga. Schmeichel, you know, you've still got all these big keepers that will make mistakes. Alisson's done it a couple of times. Ederson did it in the Manchester derby, and that was looked over massively. No one blinked an eye at it, really. I mean, and in terms of big keepers, Jordan Pickford in the Merseyside derby, when the ball was obviously going over, and I don't know what he did, but each keeper is making mistakes, but those that play for little clubs is going to be criticised a lot more. And in terms of trying to think, when Sheffield United played Man United and you had Simon Moore in net.
Oh yeah, that was. I mean, you know, Simon Moore is in terms of the fans' perspective, he's a great guy, and he did very well for us in the past few years before we loaned Henderson. You know, he has made some great saves, but he had an absolute stinker that match.
Yeah,
I had no idea what was going on.
and,
I don't think I watched the Man United match myself, but I saw highlights and I was just thinking, what's going on here? Who is this? But yeah, I think with, like I say, going back to what I said earlier, if you're confident when you're defending, if you're confident that it's gonna come back out and the danger will be neutralised, then you've got a good, solid keeper.
Yeah. And
I think an unsung solid keeper, and this is biased, but Dubravka, I'm gonna, you know, he's picked up a lot of clean sheets and pretty much kept us in the league, I'd say, this season.
Absolutely.
And he's been somebody who has definitely been, I'd say, full of confidence. But I'd say he's been quite underrated because, again, back to club profiles, because he plays for I think we're 12th or 13th in the league. So if he was playing for I don't know, Spurs or an Arsenal or whoever, I think he would be much better viewed than he is at the minute. But yeah, going back to that, yeah, I think somebody that's very underrated.
I mean, in terms of Dubravka, I think you'll sell him because Lloris is pushing on 33, 40, 34 now maybe, and Adrian is going to get sold by Liverpool after his woeful performance against Atletico Madrid. Clubs are going to start looking for keepers. I mean, transfers wise, there's a lot of transfer rumours flowing around at the moment. And one in particular that interested us yesterday was the Wilfried Zaha to Newcastle move. Now, Newcastle, since it's not gone through yet, I believe. I was trying to find it yesterday.
Look at the smile on Aidan's face. Look at that
It
smile.
hasn't yet, but I can't help it. But
I know.
We haven't announced it yet. It's due to be announced at the beginning of June, if it does go ahead, but it's likely that it will. So June 1st, I said.
You'll be the richest club in the Premier League with over £300 billion, right?
Yeah.
It's not only the richest; it's the richest by a mile. Like money we've never seen before. That sort of level.
It's an abhorrent amount of money.
Yeah,
it's stupid amount of money. Like, if I wasn't a Newcastle fan, I'd be furious and I'd be saying this is absolute crap. I can't deal with this. What is the FA doing? But being a Newcastle fan, unfortunately for everyone else, but fortunately for me, I bloody love this. This is brilliant.
Have you seen the top 5 players you're linked with? So odds-wise, players to join Newcastle. Up there, we've got John McGinn. He's 2-1. Because if Villa get relegated, McGinn, Grealish, they're going to be looking to play for bigger clubs because they're too good to be in the Championship. Dries Mertens is 7-2. Alexis Sanchez, James Rodriguez, Gareth Bale, Philip Coutinho, Fekir, Zaha, Jadon Sancho, Harry Kane. How?
I mean, That's disgusting. If we can pull even 2 of those off, that'll be disgusting. But yeah, so some massive names. I think a lot of it is going to be just, silly rumours and stuff.
These rumours come around all the time. I remember last year, Frank Ribery was tipped to be at Bramall Lane because he was on a free. It's not going to happen. Come on. They're just selling you absolute shite because they just want to drum up some publicity. It's usually the Sun. So, fuck off.
Imagine that. Gareth Bale on the right, Wilfried Zaha on the left, Harry Kane up front, with Philip Coutinho playing centre attacking mid, Nabil Fekir, another centre mid. Is it going to be... It's just...
And Wilfried Zaha does not belong in that team. He does not belong in the Premier League. He's a dreadful player. He's terrible. He's quick. All right, that's whatever. But other than that, his attitude stinks. He's not even that good. He doesn't really get that many goals or assists, and he's just... I hate his face. I really hate him. I despise him. He's not even worth 6 million. Never mind 60 million.
60, when Arsenal were looking at him last season, there were rumours going around that they were after 100+ million for him because he was that much of an asset. Honestly, the figures that were being thrown around were ridiculous.
I think that was smart though, Crystal Palace, because they deliberately set a price that nobody would pay because it wasn't worth that.
They were never.
If they just said say 50 million, I'd reckon somebody would pay that quite easily. I reckon Arsenal would pay that for Wilfried Zaha. But 100+, no, definitely not.
I think with money nowadays, you're looking at... So Harry Maguire was, 80 million?
Yep.
So he's 27, 28 maybe. No, it might be a bit younger than that. But you look at the next generation of England players. So in terms of age, you're going to have probably Dean Henderson in goal. I'm going to put Wan-Bissaka right back because I think Trent will move forward to either a centre mid or a right winger.
I can see that.
You can play centre mid, yeah.
2 centre backs, Tomori and probably
Joe
Gomez, yeah.
Yeah, shout.
And then left back will probably end up being Chilwell or Saka.
Yeah. I think we're going to be in a very dire need of a left back soon. We've got Danny Rose, but out
on loan at Newcastle.
He's getting on. He's gone for a heyday retirement home at Newcastle, I reckon.
Yeah,
and in good timing, definitely.
I think Saka's definitely in the running because the way he's burst onto the scene at Arsenal has been pretty extraordinary. And if he's not in the running for the England call-up, I'll be amazed, especially for left-back position. I would be amazed.
I think
it's very open it's up for grabs, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Now we've moved on to England, I think talking about a future generation, let's hop back a couple of football generations and talk about the golden era, where we had that midfield three of Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard, and why it never worked. Why were England so shit during that period?
Well, there was an interesting thing I saw in an interview with, I think it was Frank Lampard and Rio Ferdinand, and the topic was brought up. And a big thing with the Premier League, but it's an advantage for the Premier League, but a disadvantage for the national team. A lot of England players play in the Premier League, whereas if you look at other clubs, other countries, so Spain, Germany, Italy, a lot of their big names come from everywhere. So the fact that you mentioned Scholes, Lampard, Gerrard, Bruni, Ferdinand, all these players, a lot of them played for the same 5 or 6 clubs: Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, and these kinds of teams. And they're all season long fighting each other to try and win the league or get fourth or whatever. And now you're expecting them in the space of 6 weeks to just forget that and become best mates and try and win the World Cup or the Euros. So I think and it was what Frank Lampard said. He went switching that mentality off from these are my rivals to now these are my teammates. It just never quite worked out. And whereas other teams didn't necessarily always have that problem.
Yeah,
so I think that was the big downside.
Yeah, I think obviously we have the slightly more successful campaign in 2018, but you've got players at that point that were from a much broader spectrum of clubs. You had Spurs, Leicester. You had your Man Uniteds and your Liverpools, but you also Everton as well. There was a much broader pool of players, of teams that players were coming from, and I think that definitely helped to sort of bring in a more unified mentality that helped us. Obviously, Gareth Southgate is a great manager. However, Sven-Göran Eriksson played 4-4-2, and that was it.
Yeah.
It was the era of quite rigid teams. You didn't get much experimentation with the 3 backs and the 5 backs and the wingers pushing up and the overlapping centre backs. It was just 4-4-2, and
Quite traditional.
So you had two central midfielders, 2 wing midfielders, but even just then, your example was Scholes, Lampard, Gerrard. That's the tip of the iceberg in terms of the talent we had in the midfield, and just to have to choose 2 of them was impossible, because there's so many different skills for so many different positions, attacking, defensive, box to box. And so we put like Gerrard on the left, but Gerrard does not belong on the left. And
it's better than playing Joe Cole.
The lack of clarity in terms of being able to experiment or be able to push the boundaries. I think that's a huge downfall on us.
I think that's why Walcott went to the World Cup in 2006 at 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He'd never played in Prem before, but he got to the World. That was insane.
But he was still a huge talent.
Oh yeah,
and I think he's one of the very few players that's probably delivered on his potential from such a young age. So obviously going to the World Cup at the age of 16, that's massive.
See, I think he could have done better.
I don't think many other players could cope with that.
I think he did well, but I think he could have done a bit more. Because he kept saying out and out he was a striker for a while when he was a winger, but then he would get put up front, but then he wouldn't score, and then they put him back on the wing. He never quite figured out what he was, I don't think.
He definitely went to the World Cup too soon. I think if he'd have left it 4 years and truly developed himself as a player, because the one thing he did have was just unbelievable pace, like to the point where it was actually scary. And that it does suit more a winger than a striker, depending on obviously how you set up your midfield. And so if he had, what I think he needed was a manager to tell him what he was, rather than allowing himself to dictate where he was going to play. And so I think what he needed was a manager to say to him, no, your skill set is that of a winger, not a striker. I don't care what you say, you're playing on the wing. And if he'd have developed himself in that area, I think we could have seen an even better Walcott than the one we saw. Because as great as he was, he wasn't a natural striker.
Yeah. I think from his, if I was thinking in his shoes, which obviously is pretty far-fetched because I'm the first thing from a footballer, I'm thinking, who's the competition in the England squad? Right mid, you've got David Beckham. He's been the icon of the England side since for about 10 years previous to 2006.
Mm-hmm.
He's the first name on the team sheet probably.
Yeah.
Whereas up front, you got an aging Michael Owen. He's sort of a bit past it. He had his time at Real Madrid. He didn't deliver. You've got Wayne Rooney, who's up and coming. Great. But you've got 2 strikers, and there's more chance of him being brought on as a sub and making a difference as a striker.
Mm-hmm.
We had Peter Crouch as well, who was, obviously polar opposite to Theo Walcott. And I think he probably thought there was maybe a dynamic there that he wanted to pursue. But yeah, he's a winger. That's it.
Yeah, and I think with, like I just said earlier, Joe Cole on the left was never going to work because he wasn't quick, he wasn't strong. Technical ability probably wasn't the best left mid that there was. I mean, it was probably just because he played for Chelsea, back to this name for club thing. In terms of, again, wing backs have always been an issue because you've got Gary Neville on the right and Ashley Cole on the left. Now, Ashley Cole is probably one of the best left backs the Prem's ever seen, if not the best left back.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he had his stint at Arsenal, at Chelsea. You know, he did that move of switching London clubs, which is a brave move to make in terms of transferring. Sol Campbell did it, I remember. Carlos Tevez has done it from United to City. Who else is talking about doing? Willian supposedly going from Chelsea to Spurs. And the moves that players are making probably aren't best to suit them now, and that's why because Walcott went to Everton, didn't he, after Arsenal?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
And
he left because he'd sort of... He'd passed his prime when he left, and that was still... Wenger still... Because he left in 2018, and Wenger was still holding on to a lot of his old beliefs of basically once you pass 30, you're no good. That was it. That was that was one thing that fans criticised Wenger for beyond belief, because it was annoying. And I think he was coming up to 29, and so in Wenger's mind, it was right. You've got to go.
Yeah.
As opposed to there's still something left in you that we can develop. And yeah, he shipped him off to Everton. And exactly the same way that players such as I'm just trying to think. It's like people like oh God, bloody hell, my mind's done a blank.
I mean, for Arsenal,
because obviously he spent 12 million on Arteta in
exactly.
Is it like 2010? So this is back when 12 million is still a very
decent amount of money, yeah.
Relatively high price tag, especially for a 32-year-old, was it, or 30-year-old?
Yeah.
Arteta.
Yeah,
he would have been getting on by that point, surely.
Yeah, he was. He was in. I think he was. Yeah, I think he was 31. I think when he first joined the team, and even people like people such as Stefan Lichtsteiner that were brought in, and players. Wenger definitely changed, but again, I remember the fan base talking about Walcott when he left was the reason Wenger was getting rid of him was his age primarily. And fans were disappointed in the same way that people such as Wilshere were moved out of the club. Things like that. They still had something to give, but it was just the mentality.
I think with the Wilshere one, that one can be a little bit more forgiving just because he was quite injury prone.
Yeah.
So getting rid of him made sense. But Walcott, I agree. Yeah, you probably could have had another season or two. Where it's an impact sub, or move him a bit further back, make him a bit more of a cam role or something if it needs to be, or just stick with him on the wing and have him play on the bench. But yeah, I think at least another season before selling him. I think they could have. I think that Arsenal could have got another year or so out of him.
What do you make, Toby, of Aaron Ramsey's move to Juventus? He was like 24 at the time.
Yeah. Well, like the thing that springs to mind is just fans couldn't understand why Emery was so keen to get him out of the club, because he wasn't a massive burden on the wage bill as players such as Ozil are, and the amount of goals he was scoring, even under Emery, even in the Europa League and in the Prem, he was turning out to be a true goal scorer, because he seemed to have finally, after years of being sort of a bit in the wilderness, being criticised for tracking back too much, suddenly it seemed like it had clicked. But I think Emery, when he came into the club, when he was brought in as manager, he brought a whole dossier of every single player. He had a plan, and he decided that Ramsey was not part of that plan. And it really started Emery's downfall, at Arsenal way back then in his first season, because he wrote Ramsey off, and then Ramsey started to perform to an incredibly high standard. Basically, it was the best version of Ramsey we'd seen, and fans were saying, "Well, if he wants a player like Ramsey out of the club, can we really trust him for the rebuild after Wenger?" And there are rumours now of him maybe moving back to the Premier League. I know Manchester United, there have been rumours that he's been linked with. And I honestly think Arsenal would retake him in an instant. I don't see why Arteta shouldn't be looking at him as a serious, especially when we've got players like Lacazette and Aubameyang potentially moving away. You need to fill that void somehow. And I think he would be a fan favourite. But in terms of actually how it goes, it's just a mistake. Like, there's no other way to look at it. It was a mistake letting Ramsey go.
So how far are Arsenal in terms of years of pushing back to being top tier, pushing for second place?
You could look at it of one of two ways. You could say, one, we're a long way off. We need serious rebuild. And on the other hand, you could say, actually, we're not in as bad a position as the media make out we are. If few things were to change, and granted they are big things, we're not as far away as that. But the thing that Arsenal is starving is just cash injection and ambition from the top. Because when when the club are willing to sell players such as Aubameyang, you've got to look at the mentality of the club and say, well, are we really a big club anymore? Are we actually a club? Because the idea of Arsenal, say if Aubameyang was in the Invincible squad, they'd move heaven and earth to keep him there. And Aubameyang probably wouldn't want to go because he'd know this club is making moves to progress, and there's actually a clear vision. That's what Arsenal are lacking, because Stan Kroenke has next to no involvement in the club. He sends his son, Josh, to do all his announcements for him. Josh Kroenke is more the one that's actually running Arsenal than Stan is. Unless one, we get a solid structure in place to get player contracts sorted out, because players at Arsenal just run their contracts into the ground. We've got, I think, in Wenger's final year, we had something like 10 starting players who were all in the final year of their contract. And so the club panicked and just offered them massive wages to try and keep them, which is why we've now got problems shifting them, because they don't want to shift. But I'd say it's getting the right structure in place to, A, make sure player contracts are not run down, actually have some ambition of the club, actually put forward a plan, just like City did. When City's owners came in, they said, this is what we want to do for the club, and they've done it. And that's why they're attracting the talent that they are, and that's why they're so successful. Same with Liverpool. Klopp came in and he was like, right, I've got this plan. You're going to back me. Otherwise it's not going to work. And they have. Emery came in and he had a plan. Didn't get backing from the board. It failed. And it will happen again, sadly, under Arteta if the two are not aligned. If you were to get those sorted out, we could potentially succeed.
Yeah.
But at the moment, yeah, we're a bit of a... We're just sort of coasting at the moment, and we are slipping down the table. And it's going to continue unless things change. But if they do change, I don't think we're in as bad a starting position as we could potentially be.
That's fair enough. And I think every club has had its issues. Next, I will go to... there's two ways to go to either Sheffield United, what they've got to do to maintain the momentum next season, so we don't see them do a top 7 fall and go from 7th to 17th. And Newcastle, how they've got to play their cards right and not just seem to buy the Champions League spot, because I think it's going to be 3-4 seasons where Newcastle will go, right, we finished 15th this season, let's go for 10th, 8th, 5th, and so on and so forth. So in terms of that, that's open to everybody. But what have Sheffield United got to do to keep momentum? And what have Newcastle got to do to gain momentum?
I think Sheffield United keeping momentum, it will come from one of my biggest fears is that we won't maintain the momentum because the system that we have in place is unique, and I think that's what's got us here in the first place. It's outwitted League One, it's outwitted the Championship, but the Premier League is a very versatile league that can adapt very quickly. You have some of the greatest managerial minds in the game, and I think it is a finite amount of time until our system is overridden. Just like you had the transition from the rigid 4-4-2 to the tiki-taka, playing around possession game, to the counter-attack. That gradual trajectory, it's a natural thing in football. And I think to maintain that momentum that we have currently, we will need to find a new system. If we can obviously stay in the Premier League, that's great. We'll get more backing, more financing, and we'll be able to keep up with the other teams. But without that, I think if we get sort of outwitted too soon, then we may end up with another period between 2008 to 2013 where we fell drastically.
Yeah. So
I'd say, following on from that briefly, because I think you're right. Your goal next season shouldn't be let's build from a potential Europa League spot or Champions League spot. I think it should be build to sustain league positioning. So I think something that would be big for you guys would be signing Premier League experience, because you've got some decent names that have proven themselves in the Championship level, and you've got some names that were bench players from the likes of Bournemouth and Huddersfield. So I think if you could sign, I don't know, a John Joe Shelvey or somebody like that, that mid to upper league table midfielder striker, just to give yourselves a bit more squad depth and balance, and then that does give you more freedom to play with systems and switch around and see what can work best. So I think, experience would be something that could be looked into for Sheffield United.
Do you think it could be a completely different story if, say, Sheffield were to get that Champions League spot, and along with that, the Champions League money that comes with it? Do you think actually you could see that could be the sort of kick that actually drives Sheffield on to do more than simply slipping down? It could potentially go the other way.
Oh, definitely. I think if getting into Europe at the rate that we've progressed from League One would be a phenomenal achievement. I think that would, like you say, definitely drive us to greater success. Again, it comes down to financial backing, unfortunately. I hate the fact that every club's success is based on how much money they have. I think it's very detrimental to the game. We saw it with the rise of, or the rebirth of Man City, I guess, after they were bought in, was it 2009, 2010? And they started spending all across the board. And since then, I feel like there's been sort of a hyperinflation in players' prices. You're seeing 8 to 10 million back in 2008, and it was well, this player's huge. He's going to do great things. And now you're talking 100 millions for players, for the top level players. I think that's sort of ruled out a lot of potential for other players' growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird. Like Harry Maguire is going for the same money that Ronaldo went to Real Madrid for. I mean, that just shows what's happened.
It's mad.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think as well, we got a couple more topics to talk about before we end this here. But in terms of financial backing, sometimes the managers are to blame. You look at trying to think. You look at Jose Mourinho at Spurs, or Jose Mourinho at United. His 2 spells outside of Chelsea, obviously, that he had at United, he was there for 3 seasons, same as he was at Chelsea, second time over. Ibrahimovic, he brought in.
He brought in Pogba, didn't he?
Did he? Yeah, he brought in Pogba. He brought in. There was like 4 big signings that he made, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's when he had the money to do it. Now he's gone to Spurs. Daniel Levy, we know with Pochettino, hasn't always given the money, but Spurs have had 2 very good seasons. They came so close to winning the Prem this season that Leicester won it. They lost out on the Champions League. Both teams, Liverpool and Spurs, played poorly. I think if Pochettino had another season, he would probably get them to the final again, maybe. I don't know. But then Jose Mourinho's brought in Bergwijn and... Is that it? Is it? Oh, they signed the Chelsea on a permanent deal. And I think that's pretty much it. Now, in terms of managers, we know that they have funds. Arteta, you've already mentioned, probably doesn't have the funds to back. You've then got your Klopps and your Guardiolas. Personally, I think Guardiola's a season off getting the sack.
He's certainly, I think, the question that you always hear is, had he have not had the money, would he have had the success that he's had? And I would argue that he would have definitely brought City up, but the amount of titles that they've had and the champions, the players that they've brought in, that when you see they've spent over £1.5 billion on players alone in the last 10 years.
And they've never won the Champions League.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't, it's just a fact, you wouldn't have seen the City today without the cash that they've had. And so while Guardiola has done very nicely out of it, on his record, he's got all the titles, he's got all the silverware. You cannot, when you look back at it in 30 years' time, everyone will be saying, yeah, but the money played a big part. And it's the same. Whereas Klopp, on the other hand, I think Klopp will not have the same issue. Klopp will be able to say, I built a strong team because I was a good manager, first and foremost. People will look back at Guardiola and say, he built a good team because, number 1, he had massive funds, and 2, he had a vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. In recent years, in terms of Guardiola and Klopp as a comparison, Klopp wins 100%.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
He's brought in players that were formerly lesser known, I would say. Mo Salah, he was coming up in Serie A, but if you said Mo Salah to 100 people, maybe 50% would have heard of him. Sadio Mane, he's another great product from Southampton. And I think he's, even Wijnaldum, he's a sort of, in terms of his career and what he's achieved, he's not someone that you'd really bring to a top tier team like Liverpool, but he's done incredibly well. And I think it's that management that Klopp has brought that has helped him reach that level of ability. Whereas Guardiola, he's brought in 30-40 million for Aguero. He's paid through the nose for De Bruyne, and these were all at the time that they were coming to the peak of their career.
Yeah.
But because when you looking back at the pair, because they've City, Liverpool, and Dortmund, Bayern as well, and it's been the same story throughout. Bayern, the big money club, obviously when Pep was at Barcelona as well, massive amount of money. But Dortmund, it's the same thing that you were saying earlier, Toby. He had a plan to go forward. He brought in Royce, Goetze, Aubameyang before he really took off. A lot of younger players, and they ended up winning the league twice. Liverpool, Wijnaldum, who didn't do a lot. He had one okay season at Newcastle. Firmino, people hadn't really heard of him by that point. So I think Pep just has a blank checkbook that, yes, he can just fill in and, all right, you come here, we'll have you. Whereas Klopp was a bit more, right, this season we need this, and this. This is the money, we've got to work with it. Who can we get? And who's going to not only be good this season, but who's going to build for next season? Who's going to be the player that can really stay in the squad for 6 or 7 seasons? So I think Klopp is very much more, Klopp runs a marathon, whereas Pep runs a sprint. I think is the best way to put it.
Solid metaphor to give it.
Players.
Yeah. And let's not forget as well, this is not just happening in the Prem. You've got Leipzig in the Bundesliga. You've got, AC Milan are coming back. Obviously, they had a downfall, and AC Milan are coming back. Juve are falling off. And there's so many clubs now which are running off the money mentality. We are, how long has this financial movement been happening for, realistically? 10 years?
I'd say it's been since City got taken over, and then other teams like PSG and RB Leipzig. It's just expanded. Yeah.
I think at that point, after backing from big companies like Barclays and stuff for the Premier League consistently, people are now beginning to see the game as an investment and a way to make bundles of money very quickly.
I think look at Premier League owners in the early noughties and 2010s. Owning a football club was a massive risk because you were more than likely going to lose a lot of money. Whereas now, if you are willing to put in that money, the rewards that will come out of that are so great that it's worth it. Whereas before, that wasn't the case. So yeah, I think massive companies can see the Premier League as an investment opportunity. Hence why, like City get bought.
The biggest example of the way things have changed is Sanchez's move to United.
Yeah.
Because it could be argued that Arsenal and United were pretty much on a par, and Sanchez was tipped to be moving to your Liverpools and Cities, and he went to United, and then it all came out that it was because wages had gone up. They offered to pay greater wages. He went to United. And so when you talk about football being investment, that's why City have been so successful, and that's why potentially Newcastle could be so successful, is that in the modern game, money talks. Money talks much greater, because let's be honest, City were nobodies. If you go back 15 years, who were Manchester City? They were in the Championship, for Christ's sake, not too long ago. And now they're attracting the players of the likes of David Silva.
From Darius Vassell to David Silva.
Yeah.
Losing 7-1.
I think it's as much about having the money, but it's also about spending it wisely, because other teams other than just Man City have gotten a bit of cash behind them. QPR, 2012, 2013 sort of time, sounded like Julio Cesar, Joe Barton, Djibril Cissé. I mean, now none of these were world class, but these were still players that you'd think, why on earth are they going to QPR? What's so special about Loftus Road? As opposed to Benfica or Inter Milan or something like that. But they had a bit of money behind them. But they just thought, right, let's splash out on 6 or 7 players and that'll do. But they didn't focus on anything behind the scenes, anything lower level, or anything like that. And it showed, because they survived one season and went down the next. It was poor. Whereas you look at City, they've developed their academy. The whole complex around the Etihad Stadium now is amazing. The amount of funds they've put into training facilities and coaching staff and all these great things. So I think it's about investing wisely into certain aspects, because then you can grow for the future. Whereas clubs like, for example, QPR again, didn't do that. It came back to bite them in the arse.
Yeah, and I think that's something to Pep's credit, because although people go on about, you hear the fans chanting, "You've bought it all," he did have a long-term goal. He did actually have a vision for where he wanted to take City, and he did it. Like, you can't take it away from him. Yes, he had absolutely every penny he could ever dream of, and every single penny that he needed to get anyone he wanted. But he wasn't a reactionary. He wasn't a coaster, just saying, "Oh, we'll see how this goes. We'll sign that player. We'll see how that goes." He brought in the players that would do the job for him, which is the exact same that Klopp has done. Only Klopp's done it on a much more limited budget.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think budgets are always playing into it. And as like you say, the Man City complex, the whole of the Etihad. I mean, I'm only going to use this example because it's the last ground I went to. But when we went to Bramall Lane, Kurt, there's no way you could expand that complex. You know what I mean? There is no possible way that there could be an expansion on that. Because
well, the training ground is all the way up at Shire Cliff. It's like across the sea. But yeah, trying to expand Bramall Lane, you'd be knocking on number 47, telling them to get lost. So,
and I think that's what clubs don't do. They don't take into consideration their fans. They just want the success now. And beforehand, you look at your smaller teams like Bournemouth have done it well. Like they've stayed in the Prem and they're making their fans happy because they're not expecting this big Europa League push. They're not expecting a relegation battle. They'll be like, we're in the Prem. We'll sit here happily in 11th. Maybe we'll take a result of, we'll welcome Chelsea to the Vitality and we'll get a draw or we'll get a win. It's not going to be pretty. But the way that Leicester won the league wasn't pretty. They relied on Chelsea to beat Spurs to do so. They were winning 1-0, 2-1 last-minute goals, and each team, I mean, I know United did it a lot, but Fergie time, that's where Fergie time came from, winning your leagues in your 90th minutes. Mm. And I think that was the turning point for City when Aguero scored against QPR. That was their first league title. One goal separated it. And then from there, it's like, right, now we've got the clubs back in. We're just going to inject all this cash. Just keep it because... And that's why they don't sell out their games. A lot of Man City Stadium is empty. And they're renowned to having an empty stadium when they play football because it's not what the fans want to see. It's not attractive football. It's physically money kicking the ball around on the pitch. Like, it's not a club's mentality to do that.
Yeah, and I think the fans know that once these players pass their prime, is there going to be another cash injection? Is there going to be a second hit of cash? Or is it going to be like you had this massive peak when all this money was coming in, suddenly these players hit their prime, goes past their prime, you need another injection to keep it going?
I think, in a way, there already has. Because you had when they initially got the money, they had Yaya Toure, they had David Silva, they had Aguero. Obviously, still got Aguero, but Silva's not a starter anymore. It's much more De Bruyne or Bernardo Silva. Aguero, yeah, he's still banging them in on a regular basis, but he does somewhat swap with Jesus every now and then. Who's meant to be the next Aguero? That's probably not. And Toure's been replaced with Fernandinho. So I think, but again, then the same thing when these new crops of players, will there be continuous mass funding? I guess, forever, really, or will it run out? I guess.
No Champions League football is going to hit them hard, big time. Because if you're a player who's in their prime, yes, you've been offered, say. You've been offered decent wages, but it's like, I'm going to be out of the Champions League for 2 years. In 2 years, a lot can happen. I've got to think about, especially if I want to get into my national team. If I'm in the Champions League, that's going to be a big plus for me. And so City, especially when you said earlier, Ethan, that about Pep being very close to the sack, he potentially is. Unless he presents a new path to go forward and say, okay, this is how we're going to continue our growth. And this, especially without Champions League football, and this is how we're going to get over the next few years. Things could potentially start to turn sour at City. You never know.
I mean, Champions League and Europa League football is going to be without everyone for potentially for a year. So, obviously, due to these times, you know, Sheffield United could get that Champions League spot, but never actually get the chance to play in it. And the funding isn't going to be there. And if Sheffield United were to play in the Champions League, you potentially could have Luis Suarez coming up against Chris Basham.
I'd love to see Chris Basham go right through him. Literally boot him up in the air, straight into Rose Head. Absolutely have him.
You could.
I mean, think about the shock that it would be for Barcelona. They're leading La Liga for 80% of the season every year, and they run the game. But I think if they were to come to Bramall Lane, they'd hear the Greasy Chip Boy song at the start, and they'd all be quaking in the boots. You can see Leo Messi. He'll come out with like his head on his feet. He'll come out like all backwards and twisted up,
walking into the
battery.
Like Messi sprinting down wing, and then Big John Fleck just takes him an arm.
Yeah, 2-footed, taking his legs out.
Yeah.
I mean,
no,
I'd love to see it.
If Champions League football made it to Bramall Lane, you will be the Millwall of the Champions League. It is not going to be pretty.
Start on everybody who comes to see it for no reason.
Yeah.
Could be a nice, entertaining game of football between you and bloody Inter Milan. Nobody's done anything wrong. And all of a sudden, 6 Italians have been murdered for no reason.
Oliver Burnley absolutely nailing Handanovic in the air.
Just imagining the players pulling up in the coach to Bramall Lane, having been at the Nou Camp, going, "What the hell is this?"
But then Sheffield United will go to the Nou Camp and probably get absolutely twatted 6-7-0.
Well, no, because we'll probably injure all the players at Bramall Lane. So it's just a case of whether we get home or away first.
But you versus Barcelona beating.
If you get to play them at home first, I'd fancy your chances in the second leg, because they'd be flipping terrified and look just like, what the hell are we going to do now?
But in terms of that Europa League as well, I think you look at Wolves, and they're in the Europa League, and the little teams, like arguably the injection of Wolves that have had, Wolves have gone about it in the right way, more so than not. I know Arsenal were looking at their manager Nuno, and the mentality that he brings to a club. So signing Barcelona's youth academy, Adama Traore, Ruben Neves, who's come from when they were in the Championship, and keeping like a solid formula, and it's worked for them. Raul Jimenez, I've put him in my fantasy team, and he's done all right for me. You know, he scores goals, and then you've still got them big names, Rui Patricio, but it's still at their centre back. You've got Connor Cody, who is that club's one player that everyone loves. He's the captain, and each team has that captain that probably shouldn't play every game, because, take for example, when Rooney was our captain, he was past his prime, probably towards his end, and we should have probably been playing players like who was our striker back then? God, we had Van Persie. Van Persie from Arsenal was he had them 2 seasons where Van Persie won us the Prem. And now you look at teams such as, I don't know, Watford. Watford went and beat Liverpool 3-0 because they have nothing to lose. A team, Wolves, Sheffield United, Watford, coming up against them big clubs, a team has nothing to lose because we know how to play our football, so we're just going to do it and try and put a smile on the fans' faces.
There's no expectation. There's no expectation behind them, like, because everyone's writing them off before the game's even started. So you might as well play your best team. You might as well give it 100. and 10%, and you never know, you might get a 3-0 win against Liverpool. So I think it is that lack of pressure from there's going to be, they need a result here, or they're going to get a result here.
And you mentioned about captains. Yeah, you mentioned about captains just then, and that they may not always be the most prolific player on the pitch or the one who makes the difference every game. But to be a captain, you have to be consistent. At least a consistent 7 or 8 out of 10 every week. And I think that's something that is sort of overlooked when it comes to the captain's role. The consistency and the leadership that like Connor Cody will have is probably far greater than the captain of Newcastle, because they're not quite up there. Sorry, Aidan.
But
it's Jamal Lascelles.
Is that who it is? Is Jamal Lascelles your captain?
Yeah, he's our captain. But yeah, no, I completely agree. He's not been. I mean, he's been at Newcastle for a while, Lascelles, to be fair, but he's not achieved a lot in that time. Yeah, we won the championship, which, all right, great, but that's it. So yeah, I think if you're looking at Connor Cody, who's coming from a mid-table championship team, and they've now turned into a Europa League team, there's going to be a bit more respect behind his name, I think. Just whether or not he's been instrumental on the pitch for that, being captain means he's certainly been instrumental as much off the pitch as well.
And am I right in saying that he came from Liverpool's youth team?
I mean, he's a dirty Scouse. His accent is filthy, so I'm going to assume so.
So it could be part of it. He was possibly some scout somewhere saw the potential in him, and he's tried to emerge in a big club. It hasn't quite worked, but because he's gone down to a slightly smaller club, there's less pressure on him. He's been allowed to flourish and allowed to make his own sort of style of play, and I think that's probably helped him become the kind of successful captain that he is right now.
Yeah, and I think as well, in terms of establishing yourself as a big player in a big club, is very difficult. So many players have failed to do it. I mean, very rarely is, no one at City was going to look past Vincent Kompany really for a big name. But when he's gone, who is it? Who is that big player name at City? Apart from Kevin De Bruyne, because he's running the midfield, but he's not captain. I think it's Fernandinho, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's been their big downfall this season. It's not losing Kompany as a player, although he was very good. I think they've lost that dressing room figure. They don't have a Kompany. They don't have a Yaya Toure. They don't have that big man that can just... Because if you've seen the series that Man City had for a season, I can't remember what it's called, but goes around their dressing room stuff. You can always see there's that one person, it was usually Kompany or Toure, that would as much offer advice and give criticism as much as Pep would, and be a bit more of a leader. Whereas they don't have that now anymore. And they've got Aymeric Laporte, quite young. Fernandinho, he's not brilliant. They don't have that standout backstage figure as much as on the pitch. On the pitch, they've got talent for days, but they don't have that standout leader, I don't think.
Who's the captain at Arsenal?
It's Aubameyang at the moment.
So he's only been there, 3 seasons, 4 seasons?
Not even that. I think he came in. He was Wenger's last signing.
Yeah.
So he's only been 2 years max. Yeah. And that's one of the big factors that he will have to take into account if he decides to leave Arsenal. Because if he does decide to leave Arsenal, he will lose his captaincy. He won't be the captain wherever he goes if he goes to a club with more ambition. And so it's one of the things that Paul Merson was saying. I heard him say, the grass is not always greener. And Yeah, I'm clutching at straws here. I just don't want him to leave. Don't leave. You won't be the captain. Come on.
But he's quite old though, isn't he? He's pushing on 30 odd.
Yeah. I think he's just about hit it.
So
I don't remember his exact age. Lacazette's not far off it either. Yeah.
So you got to look at a next generation of captains, which is still in its evolving process to say, because no club has that one captain that one player anymore that is that the dressing room leader or that on the pitch leader. You know, the teams like when Liverpool went in 3-0 down at Watford at half time or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Is Van Dijk's Liverpool captain? I think he is, isn't he? Henderson. So, right, you look at it and go, yeah, Henderson. I don't think Henderson's that great of a footballer. I think the only reason that Liverpool fans really like him is because he's been there for so long. And he's got that longevity aspect about him.
I mean, he has got very big boots to fill, hasn't he? He's trying to step into the role that Steven Gerrard had. And Steven Gerrard...
when they signed him, that was what he was hailed at. He was going to be the next Gerrard. I don't think he's the next Gerrard. I don't think he's that good. But I do think he is Liverpool's sort. He's not going to be Gerrard in terms of any aspect. I think he's the closest that Liverpool have to that guy in the dressing room that will give the players a kick up the arse and will be a bit, I'll tell you what to do and come talk to me. I think that's where he's underrated a bit, because I think you can see the players sort of gravitate towards him in terms of a leader. On the pitch, I agree. I think he can't hold the candle to Gerrard, but I do think behind the scenes he's not too bad.
Yeah, he forms a very strong core to that team. And I think that's what's unique about this generation of Liverpool players in the past few years. Everyone has like a unique role that they're going to excel at. They formulate one collective as a team. Obviously, the general gist of football is you form a team, but compared to Man City again, I feel like they're more a team of individuals. And that's also what we saw when we were talking about England from the 2000s to the 2015 or whatever. A team of individuals, and you need everyone to have a specific role which they can excel at, which they're happy to perform at to be successful. And I think that's why Spain was successful internationally, and that's why Liverpool have been successful in the past few years.
Yeah, and the Invincibles as well. I'd throw in there. That's the reason they were so obviously there were as a collective, they had some of the best players in the world in that team. But the fact that it worked so well is because everyone had a role and everyone fulfilled it to the best. You had every single position covered, and everyone knew instinctively exactly what they needed to do at every time. And it's the same with Liverpool.
Yeah, and I think in terms of a Premier League team growing, every club will need that player, but I don't think we're going to see one for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
Because
one of the worst things that a club can do is give someone the captaincy based on how long they've been there.
Yeah.
And not on the basis of actually, are you the man to lead the team?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think you look at, I'm going to say for Man United, our captain, obviously, Harry Maguire, has potential to be a solid dressing room figure. He's got a big presence on the pitch, not just mentally, but physically. Big slab head. When he's in the box for corners, you can count on him to organise a team to defend or attack.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say he's only got another 5 years left in him, maybe.
Yeah.
You're not.
The thing is, who else after Harry Maguire you're going to have? You've got De Gea, but he's losing confidence, and it's very difficult on the pitch for the keeper to gear up the striker. He's saying, "It's all right, mate. Don't worry, miss that.
You're doing well."
I mean, after Maguire, I haven't got a clue because
I've got one. Give him a few seasons. Bruno Fernandes.
yeah, I mean he's 20. I think 26.
He's just coming into his prime. You can see even in the few games that he played with Man United before everything happened. You could see he was certainly like bringing a difference to the team and building confidence in himself and for everyone else on the pitch as well. Definitely. So I think if Slabhead will have the hard man for the next 2-3 seasons, I reckon.
Yeah.
Give Fernandes time to really ingrate himself to the team, become a top player. Maguire then maybe goes off to, I don't know, Bournemouth or something.
Yeah.
Retire by the coast, as you do.
Nah, he's going to come back to Sheffield United.
He could do.
Maybe. You never know.
Like Jagielka.
One thing I want to do before we end this podcast here is every time I get these boys on, for the next maybe 3-4 episodes that we do together as a collective, I want to create an ultimate Premier League XI. Kind of like a Men in Blazers type style. So every week that they're on, they'll create a Premier League XI, England XI, etc., etc. So what we'll do today, before we end this, we will decide on a keeper, and then in the next couple of weeks, when you boys are next on, we will then go defenders, midfielders, attackers, and a bench. So before we leave, let's decide on a keeper to go in this ultimate Premier League 11.
Is this current or all Premier League?
All Premier League. So you can, if you wanted to, you could stick a shout in for Aaron Ramsdale from Bournemouth if you wanted to. Or you could go back to, I don't know, Fabian Barthez, even if you wanted to. You know what I mean? So you've got the whole range.
If we're talking about the whole range in keepers, it's got to be Schmeichel, surely.
I don't know. My guess was going to be Petr Cech. He's, you know, I will give you that Schmeichel was a phenomenal player. He was very robust and consistent. I don't know. I think Petr Cech, just the way he his career, how he's gone from strength to strength, and he's not only proved himself, but he made himself at Chelsea, but then he also maintained that at Arsenal, I thought. And obviously the injury with I can't remember who it was called. It was against Reading.
It was Hunt, I think.
Nicky Hunt, yeah.
John Hunt or something.
Yeah. That injury, the way he's overcome that, and he's still maintained to be one of the best keepers in the world. I think that rules him as the best, in my opinion.
So
I'd say outside shout Van der Sar had a phenomenal. I mean, he won the league 3 years in a row at United.
Yeah.
Won Champions League. By far, for I'd say a good 4 years, I'd say he was the best keeper in the league. And then he had a couple of years at Fulham as well, to start to bring himself up, make himself a bit better known. So yeah, I'd go for Van der Sar.
A keeper I want to throw in there is Jens Lehmann.
Yeah, Jens Lehmann's. Yeah, like I can see the appeal of Lehmann because he played in, I said, pretty much every single Invincibles game. And he was a keeper that he was very aggressive as a keeper. He would always charge at players. He'd always come off his line, help his defence out. I just like I think if you put him against Schmeichel in their primes, I think Schmeichel just tops it a little bit. That's why Lehmann did pop into my head. But
I can't vibe with that. Not Jens Lehmann. You know, you say he's played consistently in every Invincibles game, but you know the team he's got in front of him is very
exactly.
Like saying Alisson's the greatest keeper. The team he's got in front of him, all he's got to do is stand in between the sticks and pick up a ball every now and again. He's the world's greatest.
Yeah.
But you know, you've got and you say the longevity of his performances and consistency and stuff. Brad Friedel, He's got the record for the most consecutive Premier League appearances, but he's not the greatest. I think that's why I think that the saves that I've seen Petr Cech make and the quality that he's had consistently over his still very high amount of appearances, I think that's what makes him the best for me.
Yeah, the only thing that I really didn't like about Petr Cech was penalties. When it came to penalties, he just it was almost a joke amongst Arsenal fans. He's going to dive the wrong way, and that's the only thing that puts me off Cech. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticising him. He was an amazing keeper, and even in the last year of his career at Arsenal, he was brilliant, and he was a solid pair of hands. Like, the only thing this is just because I'm an Arsenal fan coming back years out, it was just like the memories of all those penalties. It was just like, oh God, he's done it again. Like, that was all it is.
So we've got them Prem keepers, but let's talk about some England keepers that might have a shout in there. Peter Shilton and Gordon Banks.
Wow, that's going back. Yeah, I think out of those two, I'd go Shilton.
Because obviously,
I don't know, because Gordon Banks to have the accolade of being the person who made, in Pele's eyes, the world's greatest player. In his eyes, Gordon Banks made the best save he's ever seen in the World Cup. I think it was it 1970?
Yes.
And he's got Pele in the box. He heads it down into the corner, and he somehow managed to just flick it up in the air and get it over the bar. To have that accolade, that's got to be worth so much more merit than Peter Shilton, who was still great.
Yeah, right.
So,
with that one, I say it's very even. It's a good enough argument. Yeah. Oh, yeah, fair enough.
So we've got Gordon Banks, Van der Sar, Schmeichel, and Cech. Who are we going for?
I think you're going to have to decide. Is the
we've said our pieces.
The auteur on this.
You're the manager.
Come down to you.
You're the manager.
Purely based on bias.
If you pick Jens Lehmann, I'm never doing another podcast again.
Purely based off bias street, I will not pick Van der Sar because I think Van der Sar was good, but I think Schmeichel was better.
Fair enough.
So that rules out Van der Sar. Between Schmeichel, I mean, you can't. Surely, if you ask anybody that has any knowledge of football who's the best Premier League keeper, Cech's going to be thrown up there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was annoying, especially as a United fan, in between like that 06 and 2010, when, every final really, Champions League final, FA Cup final, the top Premier League 2 was United Chelsea. And the two players that decided it was Cech and Drogba.
Yeah.
So on that
Pretty
merit,
much.
I'm going to go for Petr Cech.
Gitty.
First man in the
I mean, I remember I think it was on Match of the Day as well. They were discussing top goalkeepers. Peter Schmeichel was one of them. And there was one match in which it was Man U Arsenal. So Ian Wright was playing and Schmeichel. And there was a bit of beef between them. And I think it very much got to them both. They both went into a challenge completely unnecessary, and there was so much force in the challenge that the ball literally just burst, went up in the air, and just came down. And I think that made me think that to be a truly great player, you need to be able to override the frustration that is the players trying to give to you. I would never see Petr Cech, lose it or go into a rash tackle or challenge or do something rash because of that. But I feel like Peter Schmeichel would.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So
I'm happy to go with Cech 100%. Amazing Premier League career.
So we put Petr Cech in goal, and the next time that you boys will be on, which I've got in for the 13th of June.
Sure.
I've got next week's guest is Georgina Stevens, and then after that I've got Pace, and then on for you boys again, if that's okay with you.
100%.
Yeah, I don't think I'm doing anything that day.
No, I don't think we all will.
Checking the schedule.
Where we will talk about, we've still got a lot of topics to talk about. We need to discuss the 2018 World Cup. That's still on there. We need to decide our right back, centre backs and left back. We've got the new kit reveals, and we've got probably one of the biggest questions out there in world football, Messi or Ronaldo, to discuss. So that'll be on the next episode's topics with these lads.
That'll take a few hours.
It will. Well, luckily today, Zoom gave us past the 40 minutes mark. I got a notification come up saying, as a gift from Zoom, we give you more than 40 minutes. So that's positive. But yeah, please remember, we are not football experts. We are just 4 idiots who go to the pub every Sunday and watch football pretty much and discuss it. And we thought we'd bring this to YouTube.
Sounds about right.
That makes us experts, surely.
I'll tell you what, based off some of Michael Owen's punditry and that, we might be a bit better than.